What's going on, guys? It's Matt with That Jeep Adventure, and today we're going to be putting some things together on the CJ5 project. We've been like tearing down and refinishing and repainting and rebuilding pretty much this entire time, so this will be a lot of gratification to be able to finally start putting some things together and see progress all come together in one glorious rolling frame. So far, some of the things we've covered, if you haven't been watching the whole time, we rebuilt the Dana 30, we rebuilt the AMC 20, we repainted our springs and got new bushings in those, and we acid washed and repainted the frame. So if you're interested in any of that, go back and check those videos out as well. All right, so today we're gonna start with the shackle spring hangers that go to the frame. We had to cut two, I believe only two bolts, two of these off that were rusted into the frame. So now I get to deal with that, which is gonna be no fun. But I think the plan is to just drill them out and try to get a bolt in there with a lock washer on it and run it up through the frame. And then I'm hoping that I can hit it with like an impact and pull it tight without having to get a sock or a wrench on it on the inside. So that's the plan. Let's get started. All right, we're gonna start with the front here. So the driver's side looks like it's gonna be pretty straightforward, but we had to cut over here this bolt on the passenger side of the frame. So I'm gonna have to drill that out and get the socket in there because that sits right there. So we're gonna need that hole. All right, well, now that we're past the not so easy ones, we are to our first one that we've got to cut down, drill out, and try to get a bolt in. This could be interesting. I'm very tempted just to weld the bracket on, but that is really permanent, so I'm gonna try to avoid that. But as this gets more difficult, that gets more tempting, so we'll see what happens. All right, well, now that we got the bolt cut off, we can drill it out. I'm going with a 1/4 inch to kind of give us like a pilot hole, and then I'll drill it out with a 1/2 inch because I'm gonna use a 7/16 bolt. That's what the factory bolt was, so I'm just gonna get a little bit longer one and drop it in from the backside. All right, so change of plans. I'm gonna weld these to the frame. So it's a more permanent solution, but drilling out these grade 8 bolts really sucks. So I'm tired of doing it. I'm welding these on and calling it good. With some touch-up paint. Okay, so while we are waiting on the paint to dry on the spring hangers, I am going to cut the center section out of this shackle. Previously, the bushings that were in the springs were polyurethane and they were skinny outside on either side of the spring. I went back to the factory rubber bushings for a better ride. So the bushings are actually wider where it sticks out of the spring. So basically this is no longer wide enough. They put this part here in the middle whenever you start getting a long shackle to keep it from flexing. But before it was on this hole and this hole. So this time I'm gonna shorten it down a little bit. So we probably don't need this center part, and that'll lower it just a little bit as well. So that's gonna get us started. We may have to change these out and dial them all in once we've got the whole Jeep put back together and it's sitting on its own weight. There may be some adjustments that are needed with these. So for now, this will get us put together. So we went to Lowe's and we got some of the hardware that we were missing. I was able to reuse the bolts, but I put new nuts on them because these are nylon locking nuts and the old nuts were just kind of like dry rotted and the nylon part was gone. So I kept some of the bolts and just replaced the nut. And then there was a couple that I had to cut off, so I replaced the nut and bolt on that, all grade 8 hardware. We got our shackles that were one-piece shackles cut in half and painted and primed, so those are good to go. Now we're just going to put the bushings into the hanger mounts and then kind of put the bolt in there just to hold everything together, and then we're going to move the frame out, flip it over, and then bring the front axle back in, put the tires on the rear end, and get everything kind of rolled up under the Jeep so we can get the springs attached. I'm still waiting on the U-bolts to come in the mail, so we're just going to kind of let the axle sit kind of inside the spring until the U-bolts get here. So let's get started on that, and we're on our way to a roller. Put our shackles on the spring. I'm so accustomed to working on the TJ Dana 30 that we rolled the front axle in with the chunk on the driver's side instead of the passenger side, so we had to swap it around before bolting the springs up. So the last step to getting the frame back under its own weight was waiting on these U-bolts. So now that we have these, we can get the axles bolted up to the leaf springs. Alright, so we got our axle seated onto the springs. So now we are going to do the front U-bolts. And one of these is a little bit larger than the other ones. And that's because it goes around the pumpkin right here. So we're going to start with this one so we don't get it confused. And then get the rest of them on too. Alright, well that's it. We have a rolling frame now. I can't believe it's back under its own weight. This was a ton of work, but it looks awesome, and once I finally got to put everything together, it just makes me super glad that I took the extra time to tear it down just to bare minimum, get everything repainted and rebuilt while it was just all taken apart. It was just a whole lot easier this way. So I'm super excited about the final product. So now we just gotta keep trucking, and the next thing is gonna be like getting the gas tank back in, repainting the gas tank skid, brake lines, getting the motor out of the other CJ5. We've still got to rebuild the transmission. So we've still got a lot of work to do, but this is a huge step in the right direction, and this rolling chassis pretty much gives me a second wind to finish this project up.